Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you are at. We hope you enjoyed the keynote session with Brian and Sanjay and Barb. I want to welcome each of you to our breakout session for modern retail today around simplifying the car buying and selling experience. A little housekeeping before we get started. So everyone has been muted, but throughout this session, we encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A feature, and we're going to have time at the end of the Q&A or at the end of our session for a little Q&A time. So let's get started with some introductions. So first and foremost, my name is Anu Roberts. I'm Senior Director here at CDK of Product Marketing for Modern Retail, and I'm going to be your host today. And joining me is some of our leaders in our Modern Retail product team, led by our VP of Product, Dave Latham, along with two of our Directors of Product Management, Bridget Lane and Brent Coggins. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about simplifying the car buying and selling experience, and we're going to dive into a few areas. First is trends that we're seeing in the modern retail area based on some of the latest research findings of what customers and dealers want from the retail experiences and really where those hurdles are at. We're also going to talk about developing a more modern dealership experience and how the CDK Modern Retail team is guiding our product strategy, along with enhancements and new solutions to help our dealers deliver this modern experience. And then lastly, we're going to show you how we're simplifying the transaction with a demo of our CDK Modern Retail experience. So let's get started and talk through some of the trends going on that we're seeing in modern retail. So our evolution here at CDK in modern retail really started with Roadster and folding in that online consumer experience and engagement into the sales process. And we were very focused on the integration. And as we're continuing to look at the engagement journey, the consumer engagement journey, what we're finding is there's still a lot of friction that gets in the way of making it a really great, seamless experience that both consumers and dealers want. So from the consumer's point of view, what we're finding is there's still a lot of pain and frustration from online to in-store. It's not necessarily consistent. The information and then the deal that they started online isn't necessarily there when they sit down at the dealership. And they're continuing to wait longer than they want to complete the deal. I think Brian touched on this in the keynote. So consumers and dealers really both are wanting a more efficient and seamless experience in that buying and selling process. Over a quarter of buyers want to be able to complete key steps of their journey online, and they're more happier, they're more satisfied when they're doing so. We're also finding that the experience has really become just as important as price in a lot of consumers' eyes. 1/3 of consumers rank having a fast, really easy, convenient buying experience over price. And the number one pain point for consumers continues to be around wait time. So no necessarily surprise, I think, for any of us on that one. Now, from the dealer's perspective, their biggest frustration by far is lack of integration. Dealers are using anywhere from, half a dozen to a dozen solutions to transact a sale, which really leads to delays because of things like rekeying or duplication of the data, and just really making sure the time spent that things are flowing accurately, that it's penny perfect. So all of these delays really cause frustration and wasted time. And 50% of the sales and BDC managers say lack of integration is their biggest pain point. So again, dealers and consumers really want essentially the same thing, which is a more efficient and seamless experience in the transaction process. And what we're finding is there's still a lot of work to be done. There's been a lot of some gaps made up in the transaction process, but there's still a lot to be done to really modernize that car buying experience. So let's take a look at some of the trends we're seeing with our shoppers and dig in a little bit more. And Brian touched on this on the keynote, which is our ease of purchase monthly scorecard, which really gives dealers an inside look at the consumer's experience and expectations around, or essentially just purchasing. And it's based on consumers who've purchased new vehicles within the past 3 months. The good news is overall consumers are finding buying a car easy overall. The bad news is they're still finding that process is taking too long based on what they indicate. So our latest scorecard showed that 83% of customers were extremely satisfied when the process lasted 2 hours or less. The Net Promoter Score, which is essentially their willingness to recommend their business to friends and family, that's what the Net Promoter Score is, or otherwise called NPS score. What we found is it actually plummeted when the purchase takes 3 hours or more. In fact, it could drop as much as by half. So this is a really great opportunity here for dealers to focus on, which is, how are we improving that car buying process, or how are you improving that car buying process to get it to be down to 2 hours or less? That can significantly boost a dealership's NPS score and really help you build and retain those lifelong customers. We also looked at in-person visits to the dealership. And what we found is that consumers still want to come into the dealership. 30% only visited one dealer to buy their car. So in-person visits to the dealership really remains the most popular way for consumers to buy cars, with 2/3 saying that they relied solely on a dealership throughout their vehicle purchase. So one of the things that we actually asked consumers is how long do they think it takes a shopper to get through the entire sales process? 34% of consumers said it's 1 to 2 hours. And then you could see here the 2 to 3 hour mark was about 25%. And then the rest, the aggregate, was 3 to 4 and over 4. So 21% of shoppers were at the dealership more than 3 hours. That's that bottom two, that 3 to 4 hours. So while, like I said, improvements have been made, which is great, but shoppers are still finding themselves unnecessarily waiting, and really waiting longer than dealers think. So we asked also dealers the same question. So while 34% of consumers think that the transaction time was 1 to 2 hours, 50% of dealers actually thought that it was 1 to 2 hours. So essentially, dealers are believing that consumers are going through the process faster than what customers are perceiving. And if you're really underestimating this pain point, you may not be prioritizing it as much. Interestingly enough, in a companion survey to this one, we actually asked shoppers how long it should take before it becomes unreasonable to them. And 45% of consumers said that anything more than 2 hours took an unreasonable amount of time. So that right there is a really good baseline for dealers to measure against for how long you think you should get a shopper through the journey. From the time that they arrive to the time that they leave, 2 hours or less is the goal. And really anything beyond that starts to degrade that experience. So we talked about the shopper's experience and what that slow process means to them. So let's flip over to the dealer side and look at the effect of time and its impact on the dealership and where their frustration points are. So we got perspectives from the sales side, BDC, and F&I side on what's essentially holding them back from being able to complete a deal faster. And lack of integration was by far the biggest pain point, which that lack of integration leads to rekeying, duplication, mistakes. For example, perhaps they don't have a seamless process between the CRM to the DMS. 74% of sales reps said that they have to deal with rekeying. So this lack of integration has a big impact on their ability to essentially move that deal faster through the system. One of the other interesting areas that we heard from the sales management side is a pain around their lack of time to coach their sales agents. Because they're dealing with these blockers like the lack of integration, they just simply have less time. So what we saw actually is this number has jumped up from year over year. It jumped up about 10%. So 46% of the sales management staff said that lack of time to coach was one of their biggest pain points. And then if you look at from the F&I perspective, it turns out that the biggest problem facing the F&I folks is getting all the documents together that they need to close that deal and to do the signing ceremony. 70%, overwhelmingly 70% said that they were struggling to pull in those docs for signature. So linking back to the wait time that the consumer's experiencing, the F&I manager is struggling to get those docs together because frankly, they don't have a seamless experience to move their customers through the process faster. So while your process can be really great, just the fact that your systems and the technology may be disjointed can cause a lot of that duplication and effort and the waste of time as well. So let's shift over to how we can improve the experience and really help remove those friction points we just talked about, and what's driving our modern retail team here at CDK to develop a more unified experience for both the dealer and the consumer. So let's hear from our VP of Product, Dave Latham, on how CDK is helping our dealer partners deliver a more modern dealership experience.
Thanks, Anu. Thanks everybody for joining this session. We really appreciate you guys being here. We know you have a lot of choices in CDK Connect breakout sessions, and so we appreciate you attending ours. I want to talk a little bit about what's driving us from a product development strategy standpoint. So you've heard a lot in the keynote, and you've heard a lot just from Anu at the beginning of this session that we're really focused on time spent. We're really trying to find the places where there is friction in the experience, and then work with all of you to figure out technology solutions for reducing that friction and streamlining the process. So we do this, we don't build product for you, we build product with you. So we've been in dozens of dealerships over the last year, really trying to perfect these pieces of the transaction. And so let's talk a little bit about what we've done in the last year since the last time I spoke to you at CDK Connect. We have built an entirely new payment calculation engine and a new desking solution that we now have live at hundreds of dealerships across the country. And this is a time savings not from a sales manager just calculating a deal in the showroom, but the fact that this is built on a modern platform with APIs that actually let us do a payment calculation inside the dealership or outside the dealership, and to Anu's point, reduce the amount of rekeying that has to happen if that customer calculated a deal outside the four walls of your showroom. That's live now. We've automated huge portions of the credit and compliance workflows. So when a consumer submits a credit application, we will automatically run those compliance checks so that you don't have to do that. On the digital retailing side, we've been really focused on taking our digital retailing experiences and extending them beyond the reach of your storefront. So that means APIs that can actually allow you or third parties to build digital retailing experiences using our APIs and then passing deal structure and everything directly into your systems. Those experiences are live at manufacturer levels, they're live at third-party levels, and available today. We're doing hundreds of thousands of calculations every month using those APIs in third-party experiences. We've been moving all of our document and signature experiences into one unified experience. So regardless of where the document is collected, or regardless of where the customer is in terms of signatures, all of that flows through a new modern system that we've built out that we will be migrating all of our front-end applications onto over the next year. And in terms of F&I products and menu selling, we've created APIs that let those products be passed into our calculation engines and passed seamlessly into the DMS. And we've worked on improving the presentation of those products within our own digital retailing solutions as well. We'll continue work on that in 2024 because we know that it's a huge piece of your profit centers. But the reality is that we know that transactions don't aren't going to entirely happen in our software, and they're not going to happen entirely in your dealership. And so our goal is to not only streamline the workflow within the showroom, but make our software capable of handling the transaction wherever the consumer is. So obviously we're focused on trying to get the details of the entire transaction into a single screen, into a single browser tab. But we also realize that the consumer is going to be in your showroom, they're going to be on the manufacturer site, they're going to be on a third-party research site, and we need to be able to, your software needs to be capable of handling a transaction wherever that consumer lives as well. So we're building these products in a way that they're API first and can be leveraged outside of our own software as well. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit before we get into the demo is that while we are investing a lot of time, money, and energy into new platforms, we're also making sure that our existing platforms keep pace with current industry trends. So all of the technology that I'm talking about, we're building into the CRM tool, we're building into the F&I tool, but we're also doing work to modernize those tools while we're shifting out the back end. So a lot of the back end stuff you won't see, but obviously the front end stuff, that's the stuff that you're using on a daily basis. And so it's important to us to make sure that you're also leveraging modern UIs and modern user experiences while you're interacting with this new back-end infrastructure that we've built. And in fact, as of last night, we started a major rollout of a refreshed eLead CRM UI, which most of your colleagues will probably be seeing this morning when they log into the CRM. We're going to continue that work over the next year. You'll see that we're actually trying to pull all of our software together so that while we can build a beautiful seamless backend and we can build a beautiful user experience for the consumer, the user experience that we present to you, that you use on a daily basis, is equally as important, and it needs to feel seamless as well. And so we're hard at work making sure that all of the software that we install in your showrooms looks, feels, and acts the same so that it's predictable and improves the lives of the salespeople and your employees on a daily basis. That will continue to be a focus of ours moving into 2024. But now I really want to make sure that we have time to actually demo some of the stuff we've been working on. So Anu, I'll send it back to you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, appreciate that, Dave. So as Dave mentioned, we're gonna, now that he's kind of set the stage a little bit and we've heard what we've been doing, let's actually see it in action and talk through how we are simplifying that transaction process with our product leaders, Bridget and Brent. So Bridget and Brent, welcome, and I'll turn over to you.
Thanks, Anu. So we recorded a video for the sake of ease of demo, and Bridget and I will try to navigate seamlessly over the many transitions in the video, but we hope that it helps illustrate one of the many workflows that we support with our new modern retail experience. So with that, I think we'll get into the video.
Great.
So we start our journey in the CRM, and as Dave mentioned, we released a refresh of the look and feel of CRM late last night. So all of our users logged in this morning and saw this for most of the screens they use for their day-to-day functions. This was largely a cosmetic refresh, but we think it makes it easier to navigate. It modernizes the look and feel and makes it more consistent with the rest of our suite of applications. So here on the desk log, one of the more commonly used screens, we see an opportunity that came in. This is for customer Chris Bergstrom. So we can tell from looking at Chris's summary information here that he's an internet lead. He came in via Roadster, which is our digital retailing storefront. Chris selected a vehicle, expressed interest, and proceeded down the purchase experience. If I open up Chris's opportunity details, I'll see a summary of additional customer information, the vehicle of interest information. We see the contact history. We see Chris's inbound lead information. We see the interactions he's had with our staff. And in our scenario here, Chris has expressed an interest to come into the dealership to complete the purchase process and drive away in his new vehicle. So our user here will create a task for next week, schedule a time and date that works for everybody, and create an appointment task. When we go back to the details details page, you'll see an appointment task in the summary for next week's in-person appointment.
So jumping ahead to next week's in-person appointment, when Chris arrives at the dealership, his sales agent, Stephen, is going to welcome him and check him into the showroom. Simple, right? When Stephen is searching for Chris in the customer list, we're making sure that the customer information is readily available, whether it exists within the digital retailing tool or the CRM, making sure that the information is always in sync. If Chris didn't already exist, then this is also where he would go in, Stephen would go in, add the information, and it would be shared back and forth between the digital retailing tool and CRM. Same with checking into the showroom. So we know that 86% of vehicles are purchased today on a hybrid of online and in-showroom activity. The customer information page is Stephen's cheat sheet with Chris in the showroom, showing Stephen where Chris is in his purchasing his vehicle journey, and making sure that Stephen isn't asking Chris for information that he's already provided. Roughly 75% of credit applications that we see are actually submitted online by the consumer, and we can see that Chris also submitted his credit application. So going over to the deal page, Stephen's able to go and actually see exactly what Chris submitted. He's looking at to finance his vehicle with a $10,000 down payment, 60-month APR. He did submit a trade-in. Stephen's manager already gave him an offer. There is both payoff and equity available. So the equity will automatically be applied to the deal. Chris also went in and selected a service and protection plan for extended warranty, and he did not add in any additional accessories, leaving his monthly payment at $898. And so now that Stephen's familiarized himself with everything that Chris did at home, he can go over to Chris's customer profile and admin, where he has more access to data and more control over the deal. You'll notice that there's quite a bit of a difference between the customer profile at check-in and here. Depending on how your dealership functions, this is where the sales agent or sales manager will work and finalize the deal. So thankfully, Chris did submit his credit application before arriving to the dealership, and both credit and compliance were automatically run, which is a huge time saver for both Chris and Stephen. Stephen can view Chris's credit score, see that whether or not they sent out of wallet questions, see if there were any results from OFAC. If Stephen needed any additional documents from Chris, he would go ahead and request them right here. So we did make some improvements to our documents in May, and since then we've seen an increase of 50% of consumers filling out the documents requested from the sales agent. Stephen is now back in the customer profile, and he's going to go through and just confirm everything that Chris provided, his insurance, his driver's license. Stephen's dealership does require insurance coverage acknowledgement to be signed by Chris. So Stephen's going through, looking at all the documents that are applied to his dealership, selecting the coverage acknowledgement, making sure Chris's information is correct, and then he's going to go ahead and send that over to Chris. Now, there's always additional context and conversation happening outside of the products that we can see here. And while Stephen and Chris were chatting, Chris was able to mention that he's really hoping to get to a monthly payment of $850. So now that Stephen knows Chris a little better, he actually thinks that Chris would prefer seeing a few different deal terms to be comfortable moving forward with the pre-selected 60-month deal structure that he originally started off with. Stephen will go ahead and make sure that all the information outside of the terms is correct. And if there were any changes that he needed to make here, he could go through accessories, incentives, the trade information, and he can also add in any additional service and protection plans or taxes and fees for registration. So back to that desired monthly payment of $850. Stephen, being the great guy that he is going to do a roll of payments, confirming that Chris does actually have some extra money for the down payment and getting him to that desired monthly payment of $850. Now, if this were a remote deal, Stephen would notify Chris that he changed the payment, but Chris is in person with Stephen. So instead, Stephen's going to hold off and print that deal sheet for him in a few minutes. So now that we've seen everything that Stephen's been doing on his end, let's take a look at what it looks like on Chris's end. Here is the customer profile or the consumer profile page that Chris received initially after placing his order last week. And this is actually how Chris was able to go ahead and already start providing information that was important to the dealership for creating this deal. And this is also the insurance coverage document that Steven sent him in admin, and Chris can go in and he can either choose to manually sign it or automatically sign it. On average, we see about 30% of the tasks completed by the consumer of this entire task list, and roughly 60% of consumers are actually opening and reviewing service and protection plans on their own when they're in this view. So once Chris submits, then Steven can actually see the document is signed and completed within his own view on admin. Steven will open it up and review the document, make sure that it's accurately signed, that he's completely buttoned up there. And then he's also going to be able to go back to the rest of the deal, make sure that everything is as expected, that we have all the required documents, and he's going to go ahead and prepare to push to the DMS. So again, in keeping note of not wanting to rekey information and having those tight integrations, you can see that we're making sure that Chris does already exist within the DMS. We're going to move forward with that customer that exists, and we're going to create that deal. So you can see that the deal ID in the DMS and the customer ID are now presented on the screen. After we've sent the customer and deal information into the DMS, we are ready to send all the documents and forms over into the digital deal jacket. And once that, okay, perfect. So now Steven's going in and he's actually adding in the deal ID that was just generated on the previous modal that ties everything together from the deal that's been pushed to the DMS. And so now that the deal and document information have been pushed into F&I, Steven is going to go ahead and actually start to print off those price details for Chris to have for his own records. At Steven's dealership, it's important that they keep a hard copy of the signed price details. So as he goes through and prints, he's going to print a few copies for himself and for Chris to be able to take home. You can see that in the printing screen, we provide all of those, or Steven's providing all the original terms that was also offered, along with the selection of the $850 a month. The DMS deal ID is also listed on this price detail sheet. And so Chris actually just got an urgent call while he was at the dealership, and he's not going to be able to finish the signing ceremony in person. So I'm going to pass it over to Brent, who's actually going to finalize the deal and get those remote signatures in F&I.
Great. Just like that, we're back in the DMS. So our F&I manager, though the customer is not in person sitting in the F&I office, the F&I manager will take the opportunity most likely to review the deal. So if we're looking at the purchase deal, just reviewing the deal elements here, we do have the opportunity to change anything, provide another menu presentation, for example. But in this case, we're ready to go, and so we'll validate this contract. So CV is contract validation. What contract validation is a direct integration to the lenders. We take the deal elements, that's the structure of the deal type, the deal terms, the term rate, etc., the customer information, the customer's credit profile, and transmit it over to the lender. The lender evaluates it and will send back either a verified. In this case, we see that this contract is verified, meaning it's okay to proceed. There also could be a rejection. So if rejected, there will be a message indicating why it was rejected, additional documents needed, incorrect rate, etc. So now it's time to generate the forms. So the generation of forms is the same whether you're printing paper or printing electronic documents, as in this case. Remember, this customer is signing remotely, so they'll be using our e-sign solution and the Sign Anywhere function from within e-sign. This allows for the signing anywhere, really. It can be elsewhere, in the showroom, sitting with the salesperson. It can be at home. It can be at a tent sale. It can be anywhere. So we've got the list of forms to print. We generated those. We sent them over to the signing room. If you take a look at the deal jacket, you'll see the documents that Bridget indicated earlier. So those were the documents collected during the showroom process. Those uploaded by the customer and those requested during the showroom experience. You also see the forms we just generated in a needs signing status. We also have the option at the top right here, we've got a button for required forms list. The required forms list are those returned by the lender during that contract validation process. In this case, it was Chase. Chase returned back, these 3 forms are required in order to fund this deal. This is our signing room. A lot of you are familiar with the signing room, the summary page. Our most recent deal, of course, our customer Chris Bergstrom's at the top. If we launch into that, we have the opportunity to review each of the forms. They're indicated on the left of the screen. The F&I manager can scroll through, looking at them for completion, and has the option to either sign them in person using a dealership's tablet, or bundle them up as we're doing here, send an email to the consumer and have the consumer sign remotely. So we've selected the forms, generate an email, send to the customer, and then we'll take a moment here and transition to what the customer would see. The customer would use a tablet or device of their own, retrieve the email, and start the sign. See that here in 1 second. This is the tablet view that the customer would see. So it's got a single email. That's the email from our signing solution. When the customer goes to launch the documents, they'll get the 2-factor authentication PIN texted to the number on record. They'll enter that confirms identity and the ability to proceed. So with the consumer signing experience, there are 3 signatures required. So there's an initial signature on the agreement to proceed and sign electronically. That's the signature that gets captured and applied to each of the signature blocks throughout each of the forms. So we're going through some ancillary forms, a WEO. We'll get to a contract document. Each of the contract lines gets the signature applied by clicking, but then the final line in the contract requires a hand-drawn signature. We do this by design, so the customer is acknowledging this contract is indeed correct and they are wishing to proceed. Third and final signature required by the customer is the final signature document. So the customer signs the document, it indicates these are the forms I signed electronically and I agree to proceed. If any elements in the deal change, that final signature document will be amended and be required to sign again. There's another step in the signing process, of course, so that's the second party that the F&I manager needs to now sign. So you see the orange check marks, those indicate partially signed documents. Because the F&I manager generates a PIN, which helps identify the deal in question. In this case, the iPad is the dealership's tablet. The F&I manager's signature is only a single signature process. So the F&I manager signs a single time, and it applies in bulk to all of the documents needing signature. We'll close out of the iPad. When the deal summary page here refreshes, we'll see that the status goes to green because it's fully signed. When we return to the summary screen, we see that this has now got a green check mark, which indicates correctly signed, and the little green envelope indicates that this was a sign anywhere deal, so it was signed remotely. So back into F&I, we still have to transmit those deals to the lender. So here are the forms. We could print them off, we could print paper, drop them in the mail to the customer, we could download to a thumb drive, we could do whatever we want with them. But we do need to transmit those 3 required forms to that lender. So in order to do that, we select those. The required forms list from the lenders on the right, the list of available forms in the deal jackets on the left. We check off the 3 forms that match those 3 forms, and then we transmit the lender. In this case, in our demo system, there's quite a mix-up in some of the naming conventions, so they don't automatically match. But what it does is presents a dialog box that says which of the forms you're transmitting is this. The reason for that is to speed up the approval process and to make sure that there aren't any slowdowns in the deal approval process. Our demo workflow ends at this point. We can't actually transmit these documents, but what would happen next is we would return to the deal jacket summary page, and at the top of the screen, you would have funding status. And we've seen even deals with corrections required are funded often the same day. We worked hard. We developed a partnership with Route 1 to open up their lender network to our dealers. We've got 70 plus dealers available in 14 states, and that's expanding rapidly. So it's a great workflow. It speeds up the whole process. It's fewer signatures, and it's a rapid payment.
So that was really great to see. You can really see how the modern retail experience is pulling all and really unifying the workflow, as well as unifying the experience. So what the consumer is seeing and the dealer seeing, is consistent throughout their deal journey. And then of course that integration on the back end to make sure that all of that data is flowing in through all of the steps of the workflow. So that really concludes our session here. And I just wanted to Thank you all for joining. We hope you got a lot out of this session and highlight some of the areas that you guys can focus on, as well as some of the areas that CDK is helping to deliver that modern retail or that modern dealership experience that both, we know that you want, and you want to be able to provide your customers. So again, with that, a big thank you from myself and our modern retail team for joining us for our breakout session. And at this time, we'd like to open it up for questions. So feel free to put your questions into the Q&A box.
So there are a few here that we can take.
Yeah, so Ryan asks a question about the list of lenders. I think we can probably get that to everybody and you. So we've got, like I said, we've got, I believe, 72 lenders at this point, available in 14 states. So we can get that. There's another question along that line about more lenders. So today we have a handful of captives, right? You list off the ones that we have, of course. We have a number of national lenders, so Ally, Cap One, Chase is also a captive. And then a number of credit unions. The next steps in this rollout will be to add additional captives. So look for that in the very near future. And our hope is that by sometime next year, we have the entire network of available Route 1 lenders for you available in that workflow.
There was one question about how this applies to the Canadian market, which I can take. So huge portions of this workflow that we just demonstrated are available in the Canadian market. Some of the exception to that would be the pieces that Brent showed you on contract validation, where we require some direct integrations with some of the captive lenders. As of today, most of those integrations exist in our 180 product, but throughout the course of 2024, we'll be migrating a lot of those integrations into our modern platform to be able to do the full end-to-end in the Canadian market as well.
See, Cindy asked a question about CRM functionality. I'll take that one offline, Cindy, and reach out to you, and it looks like more of a one-on-one type of question, so.
I'm seeing someone pointing out an issue about taxes pushing from Roadster to the DMS. I would say, Carrie, I'll follow up with you on that one directly. I'd be interested in digging into the details there. We've just in general, I want folks to be aware that the team has done a lot of work over the last year getting everything that you're seeing in this workflow to push accurately into the DMS. And we do have a team that anytime there's an issue when we go into a new store, there's a team that can work on debugging problems that may come up based off the setups for your dealership. So I'll reach out to you individually about the issues you're seeing.
And Brad has a similar question about 50 state taxes. So Brad's in New York, which is a tricky tax jurisdiction. So out-of-state buyers have been problematic in the past, right? Everybody's aware of the limitations we have within the core DMS. But the answer is what Dave showed at the beginning, or what he mentioned rather, the single calc engine, right? So the brand new calc engine that is 50 state tax compatible. And eventually that will take over everything. So that's, the desking functionality, that's ultimately the functionality. And with that, you get the ability to do 50 state deals. So the out-of-state deals will not be a problem, and they will not overwrite once they get back into the DMS, because it'll just stay as is, right? So that's the ultimate goal for the 50 state flexibility.
Someone asked a question about ability to demo some of this themselves. So a lot of the front-end consumer-facing experiences are absolutely demoable. When you get into doing things like running credit, contract validation, those types of things, really hard for us to set up demo environments to do a lot of that. But for the consumer-facing experience, it's pretty easy for us to set up a demo environment for you, and our team can help with that.
Cindy Perry asked a question on why can't there be an option to ask a customer to opt into texting multiple times. This is actually something that we are actively working on. One, to make sure that we do have that text opt-in constantly available to the consumer, but then also identify what points in the vehicle purchase a consumer wants to have text communication versus email communication versus phone calls, because there's different time sensitivities to the different actions when purchasing a vehicle. So that is something that we're working on.
Another question here about uploading of third-party documents into this experience for signing. So one of the things we've actually been spending quite a bit of time on over the last couple of months is defining what our long-term API strategy is going to be for documents. So we have a number of existing APIs today that allow you to do things like add documents to the digital deal jacket, get documents, that type of thing. But what we'd like to do is centralize on a standard across the entire modern retail suite. And so one of the things I'd be interested in doing is understanding the type of third-party documents that you would want to add into that experience. So I think that was Ryan. I'd like to follow up with you and try to figure out the types, the nature of those documents, so we can make sure we've got the right API strategy to support that. But we are absolutely open to adding documents into this workflow via API or through the user interface, of course. But API is the thing that we've been looking at most recently.
Well, I think that concludes our Q&A session. I would just want to thank you again for joining, like I mentioned. And if there's additional questions, feel free to reach out to your CDK rep, either whether that be your sales rep or your customer success rep. And we'll do our best to, I think there was a few of you that we needed to get back to. So we will do that in the near future. So thank you again. Have a great rest of your day.